Chancellor, it is now my seminal pleasure and privilege, and I'm humbled. I'm humbled, and I ask of you that our Vice Chancellor to do the pleasurable and historic distinction and to inform that the College Council of the University of Guyana, by virtue of the powers vested in it under the University of Guyana Act, Chapter 3902, and the statutes made thereunder, and after due consultation, consideration, and deliberation, and consequent of the expiry of the term of office of Professor John Edward Green, appointed his successor as the 11th Chancellor of the University of Guyana. I now have the honor to request of you, Vice Chancellor, to install Sir Ronald Saunders as the 11th Vice Chancellor of the University of Guyana.
Sir Ronald Saunders, I have the honor to express the deep satisfaction of the University of Guyana that you have consented to accept the distinguished office of our Chancellor. It is now my duty to ask you to make a declaration that you will maintain and uphold the privileges and rights of the university. Sir Ronald, might I invite you to the microphone, please?
I, Ronald Saunders, do solemnly declare that I will faithfully and to the best of my ability discharge all the duties and obligations pertaining to the office of the Chancellor of this University of Guyana in accordance with the Act and statutes, ordinances, and regulations made or established in that behalf, and will promote the well-being of the university and that of its members so far as lies my power.
Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the 11th Chancellor of the University of Guyana, Sir Ronald Saunders. We thank the Director and members of the band. Chancellor, I now invite our Vice Chancellor to formally extend an invitation to you to deliver your inaugural address. Please greet our Vice Chancellor.
Might I recognize in our audience Lady Susan Saunders. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me the greatest pleasure to invite our newly installed Chancellor to deliver his what might be called inaugural or maiden address. Please give him the biggest round of applause.
Honorable Minister of Education, distinguished members of the Diplomatic Corps, leaders of the private sector and civil society, representatives of sister universities, members of the University Council and Trust Fund, Vice Chancellor, Pro-Chancellor, faculty, staff, students, ladies and gentlemen. I feel as if this moment has been a long time coming this morning. But I thank you all for your patience. Now, before I begin my formal address, my first words must be an expression of thanks. I thank the University Council for selecting me as the 11th Chancellor of this distinguished institution. I thank His Excellency President Irfan Ali and the Honorable Minister of Education, Sonia Pirard, for the confidence they have shown in endorsing the Council's decision. And I thank all of you who have taken time from your demanding and busy schedules to be present at this installation, and that comes from my heart. Today is a day of special significance, not only because of this ceremony, but because it is World Radio Day. Why should that be important? It's important because it was through radio that I began my service to Guyana and the wider Caribbean as a broadcaster in the early years of our region's independence. As this day is marked globally, I pay tribute to the memory of the many broadcasters from Guyana and across the Caribbean with whom I was privileged to work in advancing national development during those formative years of our CARICOM journey. I am particularly pleased that two members of that pioneering company in Guyana are present today. Carlton James, my friend from boyhood, and Vic Insinelli. It was said here by several people that I am a Caribbean man, and indeed I am. I believe fervently in the importance of integration of the Caribbean community. I believe passionately that if we are to survive as small states in a turbulent world, which is becoming more turbulent by the day, it is absolutely essential that we act in unity against the tides that are now rising against us. In that context, I want to use this occasion to thank the people and government of Antigua and Barbuda, with whom, in my international and Caribbean service over the last 50 years, I have been their servant. And I am thankful to them for giving me the privilege of being the Chancellor of this university. There's another reason why 13th of February is special. And it's not because Friday the 13th is regarded as an unlucky number. Indeed, I do not regard it as unlucky at all. February the 13th, today, is my wife's birthday. And she is with us here today, so I thank you all for joining in the party. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I accept the office of Chancellor of the University of Guyana with humility, but with a clear sense of duty. Universities exist to prepare a society for the world it is entering. Each of the chancellors who preceded me understood the importance of that fundamental truth. I am deeply conscious that I follow an impressive line of former chancellors, including William Demas, with whom I worked as his executive assistant to the Caribbean Development Bank in the early days of our Caribbean integration movement, and Sir Sridath Ramphal. These two men were my mentors and enduring inspirations throughout my life. I also know that I follow 4 other distinguished Guyanese and Caribbean luminaries with whom I was honored to work in advancing the project of regional integration. And I'm delighted that at least 2 of them are here today, Nigel Harris and Edward Green. I shall endeavor to emulate the vision, integrity, and public service that mark their example. And I acknowledge with respect all the former chancellors and pro-chancellors of this university and its vice-chancellors, whose stewardship in early chapters helped to preserve and advance this institution to the moment we now inherit. In accepting this office, I see my responsibility as helping to sustain the university's integrity, its relevance, and confidence in a time of rapid national change. Guyana today stands at the hinge of history. Economic possibility has widened. National expectations have risen. Global competition has sharpened. In such moments, a country's future is not secured by resources alone. It is secured by what its people know, how quickly they learn, and how effectively they apply knowledge. That is the quiet power of a university. And that is the responsibility that now rests in large measure on this institution. In today's world, knowledge is not an ornament of development, it is its engine. Capital is mobile, technology is transferable, natural resources are finite. But a skilled, adaptive, critically minded population is the only sustainable advantage that nations retain. As artificial intelligence reshapes work, governance, and production, the university must ensure that Guyana's people are not passive consumers of technology, but confident shapers of it. At a time when Guyana's sovereignty is being tested and its future weighed in laws and evidence at a distant court, the university's role in cultivating knowledge, confidence, and national clarity becomes essential, not peripheral. If Guyana is to prosper beyond boom cycles, if it is to avoid enclave growth and continuous reliance on imported expertise, if it is to translate opportunity into broad-based national advancement, then the University of Guyana must sit at the very center of that national project, not at its margins, not as an observer, but as a driver of capability, confidence, and competence. The government's decision to make university education free is historic. It removes the price barrier between talent and opportunity. From now on, ability and diligence, not wealth and status, should determine who advances. But access alone is not achievement. Free education creates possibilities, but it does not guarantee outcomes. The obligation now shifts to students to commit themselves fully, and to the university to ensure that what is offered is rigorous, relevant, and resilient. Free education must not mean cheap education. It must mean valuable education that facilitates both individual and national growth. The university deserves recognition for expanding learning beyond its physical campus through virtual education. In a country of vast distances and dispersed communities, this matters profoundly. But we must be candid. Virtual education is not yet equal education. Constraints of connectivity, digital literacy, assessment integrity, and student engagement remain very real. If virtual learning is to become a true instrument of inclusion, rather than a convenience, it must be continuously strengthened, supported, and refined. Digital education must be treated not as a substitute, but as a discipline in its own right, held to clear standards and improved relentlessly. A modern university cannot be built on yesterday's infrastructure. A physical campus designed for approximately 5,000 students is now carrying more than 16,000. That level of strain is unsustainable and risks eroding quality, safety, and academic standards. Classrooms, laboratories, libraries, lecture theaters, housing, and research spaces are not luxuries for universities. They are the tools of national capacity building. Government has a vital role to play in addressing this reality, but it cannot and should not carry that responsibility alone. The private sector in this country draws its engineers, its managers, its technicians, its analysts, and innovators from this university. If business depends on the university's output, then business has a responsibility to invest in the capacity that makes that output possible. This is not philanthropy, it is strategic self-interest. In today's economy, knowledge must travel the full distance. It must move from research to application, from insight to innovation, from publication to actual production. The university must strengthen its ability to translate research into value through partnerships, consultancies, intellectual property, incubation, and applied problem solving. I have spent only a little time in this campus so far, but from what I see of its research potential, it is great. And I would mention two things only that I have witnessed. One is that the Center for Early Education in this country is very far advanced. Its research work is phenomenal. And many of you may not know it, but it has produced 2 books which are now compulsory reading at the University of the West Indies. Why? Because this is the only campus that has produced that research. I have seen other opportunities here, for instance, in the biodiversity section, where the flora and fauna are kept, building not far from here. Not kept in the greatest of conditions, but kept nonetheless. And what are that flora and fauna? It is money, because those things can be converted into money. It is why people do research in these areas. What we have here are the elements for all sorts of cosmetics, all sorts of drugs that are needed around the world. We are sitting on a gold mine if only we would exploit it. That the university must also start to do, more vigorously than it has done in the past. Now, I say all of this to say that the university must strengthen its ability to translate that research into value through partnerships, consultancies, intellectual property incubation, and applied problem solving. I repeat that point. This does not diminish scholarship. It extends its relevance. A university that generates ideas but never converts them into national capacity leaves value unrealized. Now, Guyana's economy is changing rapidly. Oil and gas, expanded agriculture, agro-processing and manufacturing, all of these on the horizon. Environmental management, logistics, data analysis, public policy, and regulation. The university must gear its curricula to these imperatives with clear purpose and objectives aligned to national development plans. And we heard that plea from President Ali in his address earlier today. This does not mean neglecting the humanities, social sciences, or pure research. It means recognizing that economic transformation requires intellectual preparation. It means a modern university must have engineers who understand ethics, economists who understand society, scientists who understand policy, and leaders who understand history. Balance in everything is strength. Guyana's future will be shaped not only by what it extracts from the earth and sea, but by what this university forms in the minds, skills, and character of its people. There can be no nobler task and none more vital to the development of a resilient and confident Guyana in a highly competitive world. That is the task before this university, and it is a task to which I gladly and humbly pledge my hand. Thank you all.